Over the last 25 years, Alwyn Crawshaw has taught people all around the world to paint through his painting courses, television series, videos and books. So sit back and relax and let Alwyn show how you can paint successfully.
Hello, let's paint in watercolour, and I'm going to show you how to do it. And it's a fabulous medium, it's very exciting to work in. Now, if you haven't done it before, don't worry, because we're going to start at the beginning, and don't forget you can take your own time as you work through and practice. Now, what do we need? Well, the first thing we need, of course, is a brush. And this brush I call my big brush. It's a round brush and it's a number 10. Incidentally, it's sable. And I've got another one here, which I call my small brush, and it's the same type of brush, a round brush, sable brush, but it's a number 6. And then this brush, I mean, this is a fabulous brush. This is a rigger. They call it a rigger brush. And it's ideal for drawing thin lines or painting thin lines, and especially for doing thin branches on trees. You can do all sorts of things with it, but I'll show you that later as we go on. So they are the 3 type of brushes that I will be using, but we've also got a man-made fibre brush like the rigger brush, and it's Daylon, much cheaper than the other brushes, these 2 brushes, which are sable. And that is a number 10, and this one is a number 6. So they're the same brushes, and I'll just be using 3 brushes throughout this series. Now we need some paper. Now there are a lot of different papers on the market, but the one that we're going to use is this paper called Bockingford. In fact, it's got a lovely grain to it, where it isn't rough, but it's just got enough tooth, which of course helps you paint. So you can see that there, it really is lovely. And of course it comes in pads, which is very easy and very convenient to work with. But we also need a board to work on. It doesn't matter what the board is, but the most important part about the board is that it's got to be tipped at an angle. In fact, I've just got a couple of boxes that hold mine up, but it must be tipped. Now let me tell you the reason why. The paint, or the water, has got to run down. Now I've levelled this up, and I'm just going to put some paint on there. Let's just put a load of paint. Now what is happening, it isn't moving, and we've got to make the paint run down so we have it at an angle. Now if I tip it, it's gradually running. You can see all the amount down there, and of course if I tip it up, it will run. And of course, obviously, the more we've got it tipped, the more it will run. But just have it at a nice, easy angle. Don't have it too much to start with. You can experiment later. So the paint must run down, and that is the most important part about our painting. Now, perhaps one of the most important things that you've got to learn is to be able to put a flat wash onto paper. Let me explain. A flat wash simply means that what we're doing, we're putting an area of paint onto the paper that's going to remain the same colour density all the way down. Now you can see what's happening. Look, can you see it building up? The paint is building up as it runs down. And you take a big brush full and do 2 or 3 strokes. As soon as that starts to, it's the reservoir if you like, where it's all running down, as soon as that starts to dry or not be very full, then more paint, bags of paint. It's very watery paint, this, very watery, and this shows you just how the board has got to be tipped, because you can see it now running down, and we're now doing what we call a flat wash. Now let's take it a bit further down, just one more, down to there. Now it will end up with the paint running into there. Just all you've got to do is to just take the brush on the side of the paint palette and just scrape the most of the moisture out and run it along the bottom, and it actually dries it up at the bottom. It doesn't dry, but it takes away all that bottom area of paint that was getting very thick. It's still building up. Again, that's showing you how it's running down. Now another one, that's a flat wash. I won't bother with that, we'll leave that, it doesn't matter. But another one that you need to be able to do is a graded wash. And that simply means that we're going down exactly the same way as we did before, but this time I'm going to add water to the colour. Now you don't add water to here because it would all run back and you wouldn't get it smooth. So you add water to the paint. Now a bit more water in that, and gradually it will go paler and paler. Let's get a bit more water. You can see where I just smudged it. Ah, that's still wet. Look, it's run in. That's nice. It's nice of it. Now, all I've got now almost is the water with the paint that was left in the brush. And you can go right down to white paper, of course, if you keep going. So we've gone from a darker tone all the way down to almost white paper. And that is a graded wash. Now, there's another wash. You can obviously experiment, and I want you to practice with all these, but let's just take this with different colours. I'll just darken that a bit. And now perhaps we want to run, say, some crimson into it. So I've just got crimson mix. Now remember, I'm mixing plenty of water with this, and you must have water. You can see the reservoir coming down. It must be filled with water. Now let's just put a bit of yellow. Oh, that's nice. A bit more yellow. Coming down through there, and perhaps a bit more yellow. Just to, and you see how it runs and mixes and joins together. And all the time it's because the paint is running downhill. And that really running downhill, remember that, it is watercolour painting. This is what happens. Now, when you're outside painting or inside painting or wherever you're painting, you can't always, because of what you're doing or the position that you're in, work very closely and carefully like that, and perhaps you don't need to. So as long as the paint is wet, then you can still do different angles with the brush. Let's try another one. Now what shall we do? Let's have a nice, start with a bright red. And this is more than likely the way that you will be working if you was working outside and you're filling up areas. Now let's put some yellow in that. You see it's all mixing. Oh, look at that. If you do that, don't worry. Bit of tissue and it should come up. Look at that, isn't it marvellous? Always have a bit of tissue by your side. I was lucky I had that. And so here we go, we'll add a bit more yellow to that, and if we want we can add some blue now. And the whole thing gradually mixes together, only because it's wet. It must be wet. Notice you don't get a sharp edge when your colours are mixing together. We'll talk about sharp edges a bit later. But there we are, we've got a nice variation of colour, but we've done it in all sorts of different angles. And this exercise I want you to practice because it's very, very important. Now we want to know how to mix colours. Well, there are three primary colours. These are the colours that you can't mix: red, yellow and blue. And in fact, I've got the colours here. Red, it's crimson red. Yellow is cadmium yellow pale, and French ultramarine. They are three primary colours. You get different colours, primary colours, different blues, different yellows and different reds, but these are the three that I'm going to use. Now, the most important thing about mixing is that what you've got to do is look for the predominant colour that you want to mix and put that in the palette first. For instance, if I wanted a yellowy orange, I will put yellow in the palette and then add a little bit of red to it, so that I got there very quickly and made a yellowy orange. Let me show you. So I've got yellow in the palette. I'm mixing a little, just a touch of red into it, and we've got a yellowy orange. Now, if I keep adding red to it, we're making this into more of a reddy orange, a bit more red, and you can see what happens, just the two colours. And eventually, of course, I would go to that colour. We'll just, when we've got rid of all the yellow, let's just put one more. There we are. But finally, remember, with colours, we make, in watercolour, we make them lighter by adding water. So let's just add a little bit of water to that colour. Not much, just a little bit, and we get a lovely, lovely pale pinky colour. And that is just mixing the two colours. Now, let's take it a stage further and add blue to yellow. And we want a yellowy green. Now, if we keep adding blue like we did with the red on the other side, it's gradually making it a bluer green or a stronger green. And it's going down further still. Now let's add more blue still, and we're really going into it. I haven't incidentally added any more yellow. All I've been doing is adding blue to the yellow. And now a nice pale one by adding water to it. And look at that, lovely, it's a sort of almost a greeny grey, isn't it? Lovely colour. You could find that in almost any painting. And we've got this lovely range of colours, just from two colours, remember. And let's clean up, let us now take the red, and with red we're going to add ultramarine. I think it's purple or mauve. I'm always confused between purple and mauve. I think the purple one is the red one, and the mauve goes bluer. Now let us go down that track. All I'm doing, look at that, oh, isn't that a lovely colour? Just look at that, isn't that gorgeous? All I'm doing is adding blue, that's all, to this red. I haven't put any more red in, I just added blue. Look at that, oh, it's really going into a lovely colour now. I love these colours. And just more blue, and you can see, let's put a bit more blue still with that. Of course, this is something you've got to experiment with. You've really got to play with your colours and get used to what happens. Now let's add a little bit of water to it, and let's make a very nice pale one. Look at that, lovely pale. I mean, you can make it paler still by adding more water. Look at that, it really is a nice pale colour. And look how rich these are. And they're all mixed from just two colours. Now, one of the big problems that we have with watercolour is to make a black or a dark colour. I don't use black, and I suggest you don't, certainly to start with, because what you could do, you could start to get your colours dirty if you say, oh, I want that a bit darker, and you add a bit of black. Always get it darker by using the three primaries. Now, if we use these three primary colours, our predominant colour in black is the blue, of course. So here we go, I'm putting blue in. Now I'm putting red in, and just a little bit of yellow. Now don't use as much water to get a darker colour. And so let's have a look. You can see it's not as watery, and that is a nice bluey dark. Now we can make that a different dark by adding more yellow. Now, you might not be able to see this on the camera, but believe me, it does make a difference by adding more or less of the three colours. But you can really get a lovely dark. Now, there's one other colour that I do use, and that is a green, and it's called Hooker's Green. In fact, Hooker's Green number 1 is the one that I use. And I use it because it gets me there quicker. More quickly when I'm painting particularly a lot of green, if it's summer with a lot of green trees. This is the colour. Ooh, gosh, it really is a bright colour, isn't it, when you do it? I mean, I always add colours to it. And you can get some lovely colours with it. Let me just add crimson to it. That is crimson, our top colour. Let's add that to it, and we really get a lovely earthy colour. Look at that. That's a lovely earthy colour for when you're painting landscapes, isn't it? Really is nice. And as always, let's add some water with it. And of course, we get that, look at that lovely pale earthy green. It's lovely. Now, if we want a brown, and I suppose brown is about the only colour that we haven't really covered. Our first colour in brown is red. That's our predominant colour. So in goes the red, and then yellow. So I've now put in yellow, and we've got quite a reddy brown, as you can see. which it had to be because the predominant colour was red that I put in. Now if I add a little bit of blue to that, just a little bit, I can turn it into more of a brown. It's a different brown now, and if I add even more blue still, let's add a bit more blue and a bit more yellow, and we really start to get a different brown again. Now, as usual, let's just put a bit of water with that, just to show how we can make it the same, using the same colours, but with more water, how we can get some lovely pastel colours. And that really sort of, if you like, gives you an insight into mixing from only 3. And it's very important. If you've got 20 colours to mix from, you won't mix. You'll use the colours that you can see, and you're not learning to mix. But from 3 colours, the 3 primary colours, if you learn to mix from those, you won't worry about what colours to paint, because you'll get it in your blood. You'll know exactly what you're mixing and what happens when you mix these colours together. So you've got to practice, but do practice and all your colour problems will disappear. Now, the paints that I use are in this box. I don't use all these colours because I only use 6. Now, let me tell you the colours again. We've used ultramarine, crimson and cadmium yellow pale, but I also use yellow ochre, which is another yellow, and cadmium red. So they are the 6 colours that I use for almost all my painting. Well, so far we've done a wash and we've done colour mixing. Now the other thing is, how important is the brush stroke? Well, naturally it's very important because it makes the marks on the paper and helps to make the painting. So let's have a look. First of all, if we want to paint a line up against a drawn line or another painted line, then what I suggest is, as you work down, just go away from it to start with and gradually work up to it, because by doing that you're gradually getting a feel of the line itself, and it's like doing a dry run. You're just sort of practicing before you actually do it. Now that's relatively easy. The harder one is to work this side, because you can't see the back end of the brush, and really it's something that you've got to practice. So let's go down and do it in short stabs, like, oh, there's a lucky one, look, right on the line, and just work back. Look, you see I went over, but don't worry about this. You must never worry about going over lines, because with watercolour painting you've got a certain amount of freedom all the time. And there we are, we've painted down that side and painted down that side. Now, one very important thing, if you want more detail work, particularly if you're working with a small brush, let's get the number 6 brush. If you're working with the small brush and you want detail work, then hold the brush quite low down, where you perhaps hold a pencil or a pen if you was writing. Where you want more free strokes, then hold the brush further up like that, and then you've got more freedom with the stroke itself, not this ooh, ooh. And by the way, don't feel it when you're painting, but just like that, and then away, and you've got this freedom of brush stroke, and that's very, very important. That. Now the other stroke, let's keep this brush going, shall we? This one is to draw up or paint up against a line. Well, again, just do yourself a little practice and get into it, and then start, and then you just work up to the line, taking your paint along. Now as soon as you start to dry, then get some more painting, because remember, with watercolour you need bags of water, and it just runs along, does the paint, and it will go along without showing any other marks within it. So, and then of course, if you was painting a wash, then naturally you just carry on down as we did when we did the washes earlier on. So remember, when you're doing tight work or detail work, brush, hold your fingers near the end of the brush. When you want more freedom, keep well away. Now there's another brush stroke that I must show you, and it's called a dry brush stroke. And once you're practicing, I'm sure you're going to find this, because it happens when we don't want it sometimes, and that is when you haven't got enough paint. on the brush. Now let me try this for a minute. Look, you see that? That's gorgeous. Look at that. What happens, it's picking up on it, or hitting I should say, just the high marks on the paper. And oh, it can give all sorts of effects like ripples on water, sunlit ripples on water, ploughed fields, all sorts of things. And it's a very important stroke. Now if you've got plenty of paint on your brush, you can still get the dry brush by dragging it down on the back of the brush. Can you see that? And you see how it gradually dries and hits and misses. It's a hit and miss brush stroke, which is very important, especially for a lot of different techniques that we want to use. And finally, always remember this, that when you put the pressure on the brush, like I'm doing now, here we are, it's going to be thick. When I take the pressure off, it's going to be thin. If I start with the pressure off, it's thin. If I press down, then it gets thicker. Look at that. Oh, look, straight into a dry brush stroke. Bit of luck. It's nice, isn't it? Isn't that lovely? And also, notice the brush went that way. Now, it's flattened the brush, and look at that lovely thin line I can get simply by taking the brush that way and then coming down in that direction. They're lovely, lovely thin lines. So do practice brush strokes. I mean, there are thousands of them, but these are the main things. Just get used to them. Practice on any scrap piece of paper, but get used to your brush. It's very, very important. Don't blame the brush. It's you if it goes wrong. So practice it, and you'll enjoy it. Remember when we was doing the wash where we're having colours all mixing together? Well, that's called wet on wet, or painting wet into wet. Now, let me show you something else about that. I've got some yellow. Oh, look at that. It just shows you how much paint I put in. Look at that. That's how much I really like the paint to be really wet where I'm starting a wash or starting a nice area of paint. Now, I want this very wet because what I want to do now is put in another colour just to show you how it all works together and how it mixes, and you can get some really lovely things happening with wet on wet. I use it a lot for clouds and skies, but you see, if I just put that, look at that, isn't that gorgeous? Just look at the way it's going. Now it will keep going like that, but at the same time, what you can do, you can dry it, of course, and you can dry it with a hairdryer. Let me get rid of this because that is a real big area of wet. So let me just get rid of that there and this around here. Now look how it's all coming down. Lovely effects you're getting. Don't know what it looks like, but it looks fabulous, doesn't it? Now let's get the hairdryer. Oh, incidentally, I must tell you, don't have the hairdryer too close, because if you do, it'll shoot all the paint all over. In fact, this is wet, and I'm going to show you. Let's see whether it will happen. Let's put the hairdryer on. Look, you can see, look at that. You can see it running. So you mustn't get close. So all you've got to do is come up and just let it gradually dry to start with. But this will dry much, much quicker than just letting it dry naturally. Right, there we are. That should be dry. So what I shall do now, I shall paint on top of that with wet paint, of course, and we can see where we can get crisp edges. Remember, wherever paint is wet, you can't get a crisp edge. And look what's happened to that, how it's all merged around. It had lines to start with. If I'd left it and not dried it quickly and moved it, then I think it would have stayed in those lovely long lines. But it's entirely up to you. What you want to do is to experiment with it. It really is fun working wet on wet. But let me put a line of blue through this now. And remember, obviously the paint is very wet that I'm using, but you'll see that the paint, take it up there, that we've got a lovely crisp edge, and that's only because it's dry. And if it wasn't dry properly, it wouldn't have worked. So you must always let it dry first. And you can see what happens because the paint is transparent, that you're getting the yellow showing through there, whereas here we're getting the white of the background showing through. The background will always show through. If I do it paler still, let's take a piece over here. You can see how the yellow has come through there and made a totally different colour to the blue that's on the white. So remember, watercolour is transparent, and this is why you can get these lovely glowing colours, and it really makes watercolour really different and really nice. Now, some more painting exercises I want you to do are going to get you nearer to actually painting a picture, and these are all things that we need to know. And one of the most important things of being able to paint to make things look right or look what they are is water, because water can be very difficult to people who are just starting to paint. Well, the strange thing is water is relatively simple if you treat it simple. So let's start. Let us say that's the edge of a river or whatever, a pond or something, and let's just put in a couple of posts. Now, I'll paint that. And the important thing about painting water, especially with watercolour, is what you don't put in it, not what you put in it. Let's have a look. There is a post. It doesn't matter what colour it is. The post is just there so that you can see it. So let's paint that in there like that. Now, at the moment, they could be standing on the side of a river, but it doesn't look like it, does it? It's just pure white paper. But it's amazing what you can do with just white paper, as long as you put a reflection in. And that's one of the secrets with water. Try to put a reflection in. Find somewhere or something where you can add a reflection, because it's the reflection that makes it look like water. Because with the same colour, all I'm going to do is add a reflection down here and one for that. Now, one of the things that you must do before you put the reflection in, just have a couple of dry runs, sort of dummy runs, like that. And then you know what you're going to do and you're all prepared for it. Right, here we go. So, just, you can feel the water lolloping like that. That's how you've got to feel. And that immediately says reflection or water. Now, with that post is leaning. It's leaning that way, therefore the reflection has got to come this way. So you do yourself a dry run and make sure get enough watery paint on the brush. Remember, bags of water for this. And then off you go. You just, just sort of lolloping. And these give you the feeling of water movement. And that is very, very important, because it then looks like a reflection. Now, if we just put the bank edge in, now you can see it's got that feeling of water, and that is only on white paper. We haven't painted any blue, we haven't made it look like water, it's pure paper that it's on. Now, let's take another one, and this time, there's our water, or our edge to the water. There's a post. There's our other post. This time we're going to make the water blue. But before we do that, we'll put the post in. There's the first post. There's the second post. Now, our blue water. Now, I've got some ultramarine mixed here with a little crimson in. And first of all, I'm going to paint up to it. Now, I don't want to hit that, or otherwise it will run. As we know, if you hit wet paint, it's going to run, and I don't want that to merge. Now, as it's further away from us over there, then any ripples that we see are going to be thin because of perspective. In other words, they're further away and they've got smaller. Now, as they get nearer to us, then the ripples, this is moving water, with just these sort of wavy ripples on there. As they come nearer to us, then they're going to get bigger. And the area of white left, in other words, the highlights on the water, will get bigger. So we separate the ripples by leaving more room between them. And you can see what I'm doing. It's sort of, get rid of the dark bits there. And all we're doing is sort of got letting the movement of the brush feel as though it's the movement of the water, and it's just coming down with the light on it. Now, I can't put the reflection on that until it's dry, or otherwise it would spread all over, as we know. So I'll leave that to dry, and then I'll put the reflection on it. Yep, that's dry. Mind you, when I say that's dry, never put your hand on it like that. It's too dangerous. But I knew it was dry. But don't do that. Don't test it that way. Have a look and see whether it's dry, and you can usually tell, or time will tell. So there we are. Here we go with the reflection. I've got bags of watery paint. I've done a dummy run to know where I'm going to, and here we go. And this one, remember, comes at an angle. Just sort of whoop, wiggle down there. And we also want a bit of bank, like that. And we've got our reflection with light on the water as well. And of course, we've got more, we've taken blue for the water rather than just white paper. Now, do practice water, look at it. You can even look in the, next time you have a bath, look at the taps, how they reflect, and then just waggle your hands in there, and you get ripples on the water, of course, naturally, and you see what reflections happen, or what happens to reflections. So you can always look out for these things, and don't forget, practice and enjoy. Another subject that we want to practice are skies. And of course, skies are out there all the time, especially when we're out painting landscape. So it's something that we want to practice. And I'm going to do one now with plenty of clouds, and there'll be some wet in wet as I work down the sky. Well, first of all, I've got some colours mixed, which is very important. I've got a blue mixed with ultramarine and a little bit of crimson. And this is for the blue sky area, in other words, where we've got some lovely blue sky without cloud. Let's just bring it down a bit like this, just round. Now, I'm washing the brush because I want to just bring some of that away so that I can get some soft edges for some cloud. And now I want some yellow in there because this is where the sun is catching the clouds. Now, you must work reasonably quick. A bit of crimson there, just brought a bit of crimson in. You must work reasonably quick when you're doing this because it's all running together as you work and it's all wet. So if the telephone goes, then you've got to leave it and you've got to just carry on with this once you've started. Now, let's get a little bit more blue sky in through here, just underneath these clouds. I'm still going into the same blue, and you can see the brush is jumping, and while the brush is jumping, you've got to remember that I'm painting clouds and I'm imagining that I'm painting clouds. In fact, when you're painting, you must imagine and be exactly what you're painting. And here I am painting. It's no good painting clouds and thinking of steam engines and big heavy objects like that. You've got to think of things that are light and fluffy. So as you work, you're thinking exactly that and trying to be it. So I'm working, I'm thinking, I'm a cloud, I'm a cloud. And what happens? You are getting it through your hand and through the brush, and it's getting that feeling of clouds. And because you yourself are working and knowing that these are soft things that you're painting, they're clouds and they're getting smaller. Have you noticed it? I'm making everything smaller as it goes into the distance. All the whites I'm leaving are getting smaller and smaller. Now, I want to come into the land so I don't have a break, and I'm just looking at this. We'll have perhaps a river just coming through there. I mean, I'm not really painting it. I just want to be able to show you that how you join into the land. Let's bring a bit of greeny colour into here, simply because we're now onto real land here. That's more in the distance. And we've got this coming up. We can change, we can give a bit more colour to that. I think I prefer it a bit yellower than that as we come. That's better as we come closer. It's a bit green coming to there. That's a river going round. This would be perhaps a ploughed field. Notice the dry brush. Look, you see the dry brush? And it helps. It sends things up in that direction. Now, we'll have a little bit of sunlight up here. Just catching that field. And now we'll go a weeny bit darker as we come down to the edge. Now notice the edge that I drew there is still perfectly all right. It hasn't left an edge because it was still wet enough. And we won't put anything in that at the moment, anything in the water. Now, that was done very quickly, and I'm afraid you've got to work quickly when you do something like this, because it's the speed that lets everything mould together. Notice how wet on wet it was, but notice another thing. You see up here, where I've got crisp edges, that's where, of course, it was dry. It was dry on the paper. So you're getting crisp edges for clouds as well as soft edges like the ones up here and the ones round there. And then, of course, it's gone all soft and mergy into the distance. Well, now we come to one of my favourite subjects, trees. Oh, I love painting trees. Now, first of all, this is a simple tree. Now, it's one that's in the distance, and it can be just suggested like that with these brush strokes. Let me show you one more. That looks a bit sort of funny up there, doesn't it? So just bring it round. But basically, all we're doing is that, backwards and forwards on the back of the brush, and then putting a trunk on it. And you can add one or two branches while it's wet, because they'll all run together and it won't look as though they're stuck on. Then a little bit of base just to simply show that it's on the ground. And you can see that we've got an image of a tree, but it's in the distance, and that's what it's for. It's not a close-up one. Now let's do another one, and this time let's do one closer still. Now when you're working with trees, work from the bottom upwards. In other words, you work the way things grow or go, and let your brush strokes come out like that. Now you can see the brush strokes all coming out in an upward direction, and this is going to have leaves on, so it's one in leaf, and so I'm not worried about putting too many branches on it at this stage. So here we go, we'll just put in, because some of them are going to be covered up. We better put a bit of ground, because although that ground doesn't mean a lot, it does to me, because it shows me where the bottom is and it settles the tree down. Let's just put another one there. Now, while that is wet, I've got a little bit of green mixed up here, lighter green, and then I'm going to go, it's that brush stroke again, the one that I did that tree, over the top, just adding a bit of darker to it now, just to change it a bit. And we're coming down here, and another bit going out there. Now, if we want, while it's wet, we can put some more branches up. When it dries, they would look as though they're stuck on, so you've got to do it while it's wet. Put another one up there. Just now, that is all you need for, oh, I don't like a little hole up there. Let's fill that in. There we are. That is all you need for a tree that is a free style. But you build on that, because when this dries, you can put some darker areas in to give more dimension to it. Now let's do one out of leaf. Again, the same thing applies, and that is that you're working upwards the way the tree is growing. Now, there's a limit to how far you can go with a certain size brush, because otherwise, like that, the branches will get too thick. So I'm going to go on to using the rigger. Now, the rigger, as I said, I'm going to do more with it, but you can see how it's really got some nice sort of thin branches going out. In fact, what I'm doing now, you could carry on almost forever putting branches like this on a tree. And it depends just how much you want it to be detailed. Like that one there, the one with the leaves on, it's not detailed at all. This one is getting more detailed the more I put branches on it. And what it does do, and this is what you've got to be careful with, it brings it nearer to the eye. In other words, nearer to the foreground, because the more detail we can see, to us it appears closer, because as things disappear, of course, or not disappear, as things go in the distance, then the branches or the detail on the branches gets less and less. In fact, the whole tree gets less detailed. So you've got to be careful, and the tree will fit into your painting. So you decide exactly how much work you want to put on it. But it is important to find something to give it scale. And one of the easiest things, of course, is a fence that I'm doing at the moment. Now, that is not a big tree. It isn't a big oak. It's just a small hedgerow tree. And you can tell that by the size of the fence. If the fence had been very small, then one would have imagined that it was a much, much bigger tree. Some people find foregrounds difficult to do, but they can be done very simply. Let me show you how. Now, in fact, what I will do, I'll draw it for you first, and then you know what I'm doing. It's very, very, very simple composition. This all it is a path that's coming through with some grass up there. Let's put a post up there, and perhaps we'll put a bird on it at the end, I don't know. But just something simple to show how one can suggest a foreground. Now, this pencil work, you hadn't need to do all this. It's just the fact I can't start to fiddle when I've got a pencil in my hand. Look at this. I've got to stop. So let's just take that as a guide to work our foreground with. Now, with one wash that I'm changing all the time, notice incidentally that the brush is jumping up and down. Remember, I'm grass at the moment. I'm a bit of grass and a hedge and all bits and pieces that move around. This is Hooker's green that I'm using for the green part, but you hadn't need to use Hooker's green, or in fact you hadn't need to use all the colours that I suggest. But I would suggest that you definitely work three colours, the three primary colours, so that you get used to mixing, because this is very important, remember, to learn to mix your colours. Now you can see how this is going. It's just up and down, and look how wet it is. Look at that, can you see? Gorgeous. Now they will all sort of moult together gradually, all these bits and pieces of grass. I want to get a bit of something in the path, more sort of earthy colour. So I'm going into the path now. Oh, we ought to have a puddle in there, didn't we? So we'll have a little bit of ultramarine blue just down here, just to show. Oh, look at that, that's all run. Don't worry about it running together. This is all part of the watercolour painting. Don't forget, if you wanted it not to run, obviously you wait for it to dry, or you don't hit it. You see, just there, look, if I touch it, it's going to run together. If I'd left it and left a thin line there, we'd have been all right. But I'm quite happy for that to run together. So put that up there. That's just started that going now, the path. Everything is just starting to get to, oh, look, some more stones there. You see, this I'm obviously having to imagine as I go along, because we'll have a bit more yellow there, a bit more bright grass, I think, because I'm making it up, and therefore to make it up you've got to know what you're doing, or you can't paint anything. So the making up is telling yourself a story and trying to imagine and see what is there. And it's a lovely way of practicing, because it's a nice way of painting. You just sort of go, oh, look at that, and just imagine those bits and pieces there. Of course, the trouble is I could have gone all day doing this and finish up all the way down here, but I've got to stop, or otherwise there won't be enough time to do all the other things we want to do. So let's just finish by, this stage, because I want this to dry in a minute and then carry on. Let's just put one or two more bits up there, and now we're going to let that dry and come straight back to it. Right, that's dry, and I'm going to start by putting the post in, I think. Let's get that established. Just put a few little bits down there as though grass is growing over it. Right, now we want a little darker areas oh, that's not dark enough. It's amazing. Have you noticed, by the way, watercolour always dries lighter. It's always richer and darker when it's wet. But when it dries, it's always lighter. So never be too afraid of getting your work or your colours dark, because it will always go that much lighter. You get used to it, of course. It comes from experience when you know just how dark it's going to, or how light it's going to get. Let me touch that, still wet, it's perfectly all right, just to sort of mould that in a bit. And what I'm doing, in fact all I'm doing is doing what I did before, except I'm leaving bits that are underneath. In other words, I'm covering some areas up, and where I cover them up, they're going darker, because as we know, the paint is transparent, and so where it covers up the paint underneath, it's darker. Where I go over the white, or let's say the paper like I did there, that will dry lighter still. So you're getting a depth, or more three-dimension, within this grass. The other thing that I want to do, incidentally, the sun is over on the left, over there, and so when I put shadows on, the shadows are going to come on this side of everything. Just put a bit more in here, bit of dry brush just flicking over there. That's finger, don't worry about fingers, I just wanted that to just go off a bit softer. It's funny how you can use a finger and it really helps. You can use almost anything as long as it works. So never worry about like a bit of blotting paper, a bit of tissue. Just do something with your finger if you don't particularly like it. Now, I want more of a shadow colour now for the path. So I'm using ultramarine and crimson for some shadows. I just want to make that into like a stone. So you get a shadow on there, shadow on that one. And it's where the sun is obviously catching the top of, say, a wet stone, and you get in the shadow. Oh, there should be a shadow. Let's cast a shadow from the post. And one or two bits and pieces over here. Now, I just want to put one or two birds in, because they're often around, of course, in landscape, and they're nice to put in our paintings. And they're very simple, just a couple of brush strokes, or one as they get further away. Remember that they are getting further away if they're, as it were, coming from down there. Just a flick, they're sort of coming away, and they're smaller. It's amazing what happens if you watch some crows or rooks. Just see how they fly, and in a distance they almost look, let's get a few more, they almost look like falling leaves, just sort of, and they're sort of coming away. And because we've got it in perspective, these are small and these are getting bigger, because obviously everything that comes is nearer to us is larger. And so they're flying over there. They could perhaps be a little bit darker, so just add, never go over them too much. So just that little bit, because they looked a bit pale near there. But that is a very simple way, if you like, of doing a foreground. But simplicity only comes from practice. So you must practice, and you'll enjoy doing that, I'm sure you will. Don't forget though, practice. Now, I'd like to show you one or two paintings that show some of the things that we've been doing earlier on. And this painting in particular, look, all it is three main washes. A wash for the sky, a wash for the buildings, and a wash for the water. And look at the water. The reflections are done just like I did the posts. Remember the posts? And of course the boat as well. And yet it really does look like water. Now, here's another one with water. These yachts in the distance, look how simple they're done, and how simple the reflections are. I've left white paper for the reflections, and the big yacht as well. The reflection of the sail is white paper left, and remember the blue water that we did? Well, this is done exactly the same, leaving bits of white through for reflection, or white light coming on the water, and I've just put some darker tones over here to give the movement of the water. Now this one is Salisbury Cathedral. Look at the sky. The sky is very similar to the one that I did earlier on, and very important this,
look at the way these willow trees are moving. The brush strokes are all moving round and following the shape, and it's the way the wind has blown the willows. Don't forget what I said. Your brush strokes should follow the way that things grow or go, and that has helped to give that movement in there. Oh, and look at the simplicity of the foreground. It's a big area of grass, except it's done with just one wash all the way down, changed slightly colour as I've come down here, and we've got some dry brush strokes left in there, just to leave these little flecks of white which give life to the painting, or certainly to the foreground. And then when it was dry, one or two little bits with a smaller brush put on there to suggest grass. And it's so simple. You can do foreground simple, and they look fine. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I really enjoyed making it for you. But remember, you must practice. Now, even if you practice only half an hour a day, or 10 minutes, in a week you'll see an improvement. And that's important because you'll be gaining confidence, and the more confidence you get, the better your paintings will be. And of course, the better your paintings, the more you'll enjoy it. You must enjoy your paintings. It's a wonderful thing to do. Why don't you have a go? It's easier than this.
I've used Daler-Rowney materials for all the work in this video and are available from most W.H. Smith High Street stores. Daler-Rowney have been producing high quality art materials for over 200 years, which are highly recommended by W.H. Smith and of course myself, and I use them for all of my work. These are Daylon brushes, and with their special fibres they keep their shape and last for a very long time, and they're used both by beginners and professionals. These Georgian watercolour sets are economical, and the paint gives a rich transparent colour. Each set comes with a carefully selected colour range. Bockingford paper has been the most popular surface for watercolour painters for many years, both for beginners and professionals. The Bockingford name is renowned for consistent quality. I use it for a lot of my watercolour painting and thoroughly recommend it. And remember, W.H. Smith have all the art materials you'll need.